Scott and Vanessa from Enterprise. They're going to talk about some job search strategy tips. So let's give them your undivided attention. And after the event's over, I'll be right out here. You can come out and swipe with your card on one card, or you can tell me your own number. All right, let's give them a round of applause.
And at any point, if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop us, interrupt us. Don't worry, very laid back. We've got a few slides to go through, and then anything that's on y'all's mind or any questions that come up from it. So, I'm Scott Savage. I'm the area manager with Enterprise. I handle Beaumont, Port Arthur, I guess all the way out to Orange, kind of Winnie area. And I've been out here for 6 months. Prior to that, I ran the area in Houston, which is Pearland, Friendswood, Clear Lake area and all that for about 3.5 years. So, been with the company now going on 12 years.
Before they rent a car.
Yeah, oh gosh, come on. So, been with the company for 12 years. I love it, and you know, it's funny. It's one of those jobs that I look back at and it's like, wow, 12 years. So, it's flown by. I had a lot of fun. So, and as a matter of fact, she was one of my hires, so I guess I did a good job.
It was the best decision he ever made. So my name's Vanessa, and I actually started with Enterprise 2 years on Thursday. So yeah, my 2-year anniversary is coming up. So I've been promoted 3 different times. I started actually in, like he was saying, in his area. I went to the University of Houston, so whenever I graduated, I remember thinking, I don't really necessarily want to rent cars. I had always talked to Enterprise at the career fairs, and you know, it didn't necessarily seem like that cool, attractive thing you wanted to do. You know, you never want to grow up to rent cars. So I went out and I did an outside sales job. I did that for about a year. It wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. It was a lot of cold calling, which I wasn't really good at. And I remember thinking back and saying, hey, I'm working like 60 hours a week. You know, that I'm not necessarily happy with what I'm doing. What am I going to do now? So I remember contacting the recruiter. And I ended up interviewing for Enterprise, and I got hired on 2 weeks later. So I think it's the best decision I've ever made, to be honest with you. I was in our management training program for about 7 months, and then I got promoted to assistant manager. I was an assistant manager for about 6, and then got promoted to a branch manager. Did that for about 3 months, and then I got promoted to talent acquisition specialist, which is just a fancy word for recruiter. So now I get to come out and get to go to all the different universities and yeah, get to do all the different presentations. So if you guys have any questions throughout the entire presentation, just raise your hand and we'll be more than happy to help you. Ready? Okay, so networking. 85% of all jobs are found through networking. So how many of you guys actually think you guys have a good network around you? No? Okay, so do you guys know what how many of you are seniors? Or do you guys know what you want to do whenever you graduate? Okay, so 85% of all jobs are found through a relationship. So basically somebody that you know, somebody, a friend of a friend. I know with us, it's 60% of our hires are through employee referrals. So basically somebody that we already have that's hired on, they just send the names in and they end up getting hired. So it's basically who you know, what you know, how much of the company you know, because you know a lot of the times that's that relationship that you're able to build. How many times, whenever you interview, it's usually, right?
What's that?
Whenever you interview somebody, it's usually through a networking phase?
Well, yeah, without a doubt. In fact, I would probably argue that statistic is a little low. It's going to be word of mouth. In our industry specifically, you can imagine there's not a ton of people that come in there and say, hey, I went to school and I wanted to rent cars, and I got a degree in renting cars. They don't have it. And so the reality is they hear about it by word of mouth, whether it be maybe they were a customer of ours, or maybe they have a friend. So, yeah.
So what we're going to talk about a little bit more is about networking, making sure that you guys are building that circle around you, making sure that you're set up for success and have that foundation around you. So know what you what you want to accomplish. So and make sure that you guys are investigating specific career fields.
Well, and I would say to investigate, I would say you got to come in a little bit more prepared than, hey, they've got a position available, it's a sales position, it's a position that I'm applying for, and understanding a little bit more maybe about the background of the company, maybe a little bit further as far as what the culture is within that company. So understanding just more than, hey, using Enterprise as an example, they rent cars.
Right. So for me as a recruiter, I think my biggest pet peeve is whenever I go to a career fair and people are literally looking at the sign that says Enterprise Rent a Car and they ask, well, what do you guys do? I mean, it's Enterprise Rent a Car. You know, so making sure that you're aware of what, first of all, what you're looking for, what you're interviewing for, and what you guys have to offer. So basically putting yourself in there and say, hey, this is why I would be good for that position. Assistance in narrowing options. So making sure that you guys know what it is that you guys are looking for, being sure of what you have to offer for that company. Obtain advice on where you might fit in. This goes back to talking to your friends, making sure that, you know, if it's a sales position that you're good at sales. If that's not something that you're interested in, then don't even waste your time, don't waste the other person's time. If you see that it's a management position and you don't necessarily see yourself as the manager, you want to go into, I don't know, law school, then there's no reason to waste, if you're wasting your time, the recruiter's time. Make sure what you guys want to do.
Well, the only thing I would say is, you know, oftentimes, and I guess to kind of set the background a little bit, so Vanessa does all of our first round interviews. So if you were to apply online, you would meet with Vanessa, you do your first interview. And should you get passed on with the second interview, you would go to the appropriate area manager. You interview with that area manager. In that stage, you know, oftentimes I'll hear, and just in asking, because I'm curious, I want to know where they see themselves, short term, long term. But short term, a lot of people will say HR, or maybe they'll say recruiting, or I'd love to do the vehicle sales, and you know, then it kind of makes me question, well, are you aware of why you're here? You're interviewing for a management training position that has a very identified career track, and so I think that goes right in with, hey, where are you going to fit in? If it's HR that you're looking for, then you need to really narrow your search down to that.
Learn the jargon and important issues in the field. Again, just make sure that you guys are doing your homework. Make sure that you guys know what we do, that you don't just necessarily come in there blindsided. And then whenever I ask you, well, hey, did you guys do any research on the company? And you just say no. Or a lot of the times people just say yes, and then I start asking questions, and I can clearly tell that, hey, you really didn't look anything up. Broaden your network of contacts for future reference. And I think that that's one of the biggest ones. You never know where you're going to end up. You never know. Like I told you, whenever I first graduated, I was like, I don't really want to grow up and rent cars. But it was that relationship that I always kept with Enterprise and making sure that I always kind of kept them in my back burner. So make sure that you're talking to people. Just make sure that you're making as many friends. Make sure that any company that comes up to meet with you guys, make sure that you guys build that relationship. It might not be something that you're interested in now, but you never know in the future. Anything to that? Create a strategy for entering your field of interest. Again, making sure that you guys know what field you want to go in, and making sure that you're building those relationships with people. Build confidence for your job interviews. I think that that's one of the most important things for us. We hire, at the end of the day, we're hiring management training. So we want somebody that's confident. We want somebody that, you know, is awesome, that has a personality whenever they come into the door. I would say about 50% of the people that come in with, you know, very nervous, and I understand nerves, but like with a bad handshake. And I think that that's one of the most important things that you can do, have a good handshake. Our regional vice president, he judges off of that offhand. He thinks, you know, that's personality. If they don't have a good handshake, then that means that they're not necessarily confident. How are you going to be confident as a manager? Anything?
The only thing I'd say to that is, in addition, is a lot of times I'll find myself mirroring the energy or the morale of the applicant that we're interviewing. And so, if you come in with high energy, I'm going to have high energy. Now, off the record, if I'm at the office with any of my coworkers, they'll tell you I probably have the most energy of anybody within the office. But as soon as I sit into an interview setting, I'm neutral until I kind of understand where that employee is or that applicant is.
Identify your strengths and your weakness. Know what it is that you're good at. Know what it is that you're bad at. You always have to be able to look in the mirror and say, hey, these are my strengths, and maybe I can improve on this. I always ask that question during interviews, and a lot of the times people say, well, I really don't have a weakness. But in reality, nobody's really perfect, right? You have to have some sort of weakness. And you just be able to identify that, be able to say, hey, you know, maybe this is my weakness, but I can work on this, and I've been trying to improve it by doing this and this.
Yeah, I'm a stickler on that question, and that's one of the questions that I'll go through, and I've kind of learned to separate it in the interview from, I'll talk about their strengths, and then I won't immediately ask assume there's probably an interview class here that addresses how to approach that and how to handle it. And I don't necessarily agree with the fluff answer, if you will, of, oh, I work too hard, or, I stay too late, and sometimes I find myself digging a little too deep when I work. And, the point of this is, hey, can you humble yourself enough to understand, hey, this is where I can improve, and this is where I can be helped. And, as, an assistant manager or a branch manager, their job is a sales coach, and their job is to help coach you and develop and build you. And if they have no idea how to improve you, or where we could assist, then it's kind of all for nothing. So.
Okay, preparation. Learn as much as you can about the organization. So again, make sure that you guys are doing your homework. Prepare a list of questions. I think I'm a big stickler on that, and I know that I make sure whenever I send them, if I do send them on to a second interview, I always say make sure you bring at least 4 to 5 different questions. Just because I don't think that there's anything worse than you just spent 40 minutes talking to somebody and interviewing somebody, and then at the end of it all, you ask, hey, well, do you have any questions? And they say no. Just because I kind of feel like I just wasted 40 minutes, or I could have been doing this for 40 minutes if they really don't have any questions. The least that you can do is, ask about the person's career. Ask about, hey, what do you think about enterprise? What do you like about it? So I'm a big stickler on that.
And I guess you could say that. The thing I would add would be questions that I will often get, especially in a 2-step interview or a 3-step interview process, would be benefits related, and maybe even compensation to a certain extent. And if I'm honest with everybody, I would just say that those are things that you need to probably either ask early. They're very important. There's no doubt about it. And they're certainly going to steer somebody either away or to a career field. But I would inquire that as early on in the interview process as possible, just because once you get to the kind of the decision-making process, if the first question out of your mouth is what's in it for me, it doesn't send the right message. So.
Okay. Learn something about the person you'll be interviewing with. I think one of the best people that I've interviewed with, literally whenever I said, hey, well, I'm going to send you on to a second interview, they said, okay, well, what is he like? What is, does he like this? Does he like that? And I like that about him, just because that means you're really engaged and you're showing that, you want to know the person on the other end, or you want to know the next person. Or a lot of the times I see that people look me up on LinkedIn before they come in, or look up our regional vice president. So they're able to ask him about his career, but yet with him, and he doesn't even know it. I remember the first time he came into my office and was like, he just asked about how did I transition from this position to this position. Like, he was amazed by it. He said he actually took the time to look him up, and he was like, I really need to go on there and update it. So I think that that's one of the best things, because that shows, hey, you're really interested in getting this position, you did your homework, and you want to know a little bit more about us. And then arrange the interview. Make sure that you ask for the interview, and make sure that obviously you're there on time. Make sure that you decide the length of it. You decide, make sure that you're engaged in questions, all that. You have to do that. Turn the key. Be sure to. So yeah, just make sure that you're dressed appropriately. And a business suit. Does anybody have any questions on dress or anything? No? Okay. Bring copies of your resume. A lot of the times you don't know how many people are going to be in the interview. Whenever Scott does interviews, a lot of times it's him and the branch manager. So make sure that you're always bringing different copies. Sometimes the branch manager isn't in there. Sometimes he might have somebody else sitting on the interview. So just make sure that you're bringing different copies of it. Make sure that you refer to your list of questions and that you initiate the conversation. A lot of the times whenever I'm bringing people in, hey, how's your day going? Make sure that you're engaging on that, not that you're just not like, oh, okay, just kind of do it. Oh, it's going great. How's yours? Make sure that you're making small talk. That shows a lot about your personality. As for referrals, arrive on time. My office is right next to our gate, to like our receptionist. So a lot of the times people will come in and like I see that they're 2 minutes late, and they say, oh yeah, I've been here. It's just that, she called me in late. Well, no, I literally can hear whenever, they're walking in. And I can tell if they're here 10 minutes early, 15 minutes early, if they got there right on time. And to add to that, and it's going to be back to be a polite professional, stay on track, a lot of times I can hear if they're engaging in conversation with our receptionist. And a lot of the times she'll come in and tell me, hey, you know, your interview's here, he's good. Or no, he's not that good. Or, you know, I can hear they're asking her questions and they're engaging with her, and she likes to talk a lot. And she likes to engage in that. So that tells me a lot about the personality. If they just sit there and, you know, they don't try to talk to her or they don't ask her any questions, then I can see, hey, you're not necessarily going to be talking to my customers. You're not necessarily going to be approaching my customers. But if they're sitting there asking her questions and maybe asking her about her weekend or how long she's been working for Enterprise, that means, hey, you're really interested in this and you're engaged.
I think it's safe to say we're not the only company that would go a long way with. You know, certainly in dealing with a lot of various businesses, dealerships, insurance partners, that gatekeeper, if you will, the receptionist, you certainly want to make sure if you're going to win people over, obviously the people interviewing you, but the people at the front oftentimes will have a lot of say, or at the very least will either speak positively or negatively for you. So.
And I just don't think it's necessarily in an office setting. We do observations. So whenever, you know, a candidate goes to a second interview, they sit in the lobby. And I remember whenever I was one of Scott's employees, so but they would actually sit in the lobby. So a lot of times Scott wouldn't come in until they would actually have their interview. So he would come in and ask us, hey, have they been talking to you guys? Has she been talking to you guys? Or has she made any, how was she? And a lot of times they don't know, they just kind of come in and sit there. But he would ask all of our opinions, again, because he wants to see if there's that personality.
You hit the wrong three in the back.
There you go.
And then the only other thing I'll say is on the arrive on time, it kind of seems like a no-brainer. That is 100% a deal buster. For me, at the second interview, if they don't make it on time, I won't continue with the interview. In fact, we'll just discontinue the observation at that point. And there may be a rightful deal, and you know we'll kind of filter through that as needed, and possibly reschedule the interview. But and specific to our business, timeliness, somebody's ability to be able to show up early, and this should be, you're getting the absolute best of this applicant. And, you know, you're getting their best dress, they're preparing, they, you know, outlined on everything that they want to do, and if they don't make it on time, like I said, for me, that's typically a deal buster. So.
Okay. Again, it says just make sure that you're hired 20 to 30 minutes early. Yes.
About what you were saying a second ago, I actually went into a job interview one time, and the person doing the interview was in the lobby, sitting and waiting with me. I didn't even know.
I'll do that times also.
Yeah.
I'll sit out there, and they'll have absolutely no idea who I am. So,
I was talking to him, so I did pretty good, but I didn't
Note to
expect that.
self. He might sit in the lobby with you.
well, you know, you get a lot of, you can read them, right? I mean, if they're nervous and frantic and going through all the, you know, then I'll know, okay, you know what, try to make it as laid back as possible. Maybe I'll minimize my eye contact and, you know, try to make them feel a lot more comfortable, because nerves is one thing. We can get past all that. You know, I can certainly overlook that, but I've got to understand that that's a real factor for some people. And, you know, but you kind of get a good view of what's going on with them.
Okay. And then let's see. So yeah, make sure that you guys are 20 to 30 minutes. How early do you guys get there to the interview? About how many? 10, 15 minutes. Okay.
To me, it depends on the job.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if I'm going for, I've been to a lot of jobs in Dallas, I was trying to go out there.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a sales job, I usually show up 15 minutes prior. If it's a office job, I'll show up about 30, 45 minutes prior. And if it's I tried for a lot of jobs I didn't qualify for, so I showed up an hour early. More and more, depending.
So why does the sales job only get 15 minutes?
Because for me, whenever I go into a sales job position, it seems to have a a lot of people come in there, a lot of wait time.
Right.
So I just show up 15 minutes, go in, and I'll end up waiting anyways.
Got it.
But with every other job, it seems you go in quick. And, you know, you're right on time, right on the spot. With a sales job, you got to go in there, you're going to end up waiting majority of the time.
Mhm.
Not saying you're a couple.
Right. Yeah. No, well, typically I would say about 15, 20 minutes earlier. Let's see. Ask about vacancies and ask permission to use their name. So, yeah, just make sure that you're comfortable enough with that person and that, you know, you're able to use their first name and not, I would say, hey, Mr. Savage.
Yeah, anytime if somebody refers to me, I say, call me Scott immediately, because I don't want there to be that formality where neither one of us can relax because we feel like it's a little too formal.
Perfect. sample questions, if an interview. Okay, so have you guys done any sample questions on interviewing? No, like mock interviews? No, okay. So just make sure that you're ready to talk about, your background, advancement within the company, any kind of rewards, promotion, the salary. Usually, like you say, with us, that's usually within the first interview. If I'm sending you on to a second interview, they're expecting to already, hey, well, didn't you go over this during your first interview? So basically, I should get all the salary questions, all the benefits questions, all of that. If you're going, and usually it's a 2 or 3 step interview process, so usually that would be during your first interview. And then if you have any questions on that same step, I would email that original person, not necessarily go and ask that during the second interview. Job search, referrals, problems, and lifestyle. So basically, I know that for my interviews, I address all of these. I think you just addressed a couple, right?
Yeah, a couple, and then there's a couple that I guess I'm a little more specific about. And one of them I want to try to determine, is this somebody just looking for a job? Is this somebody looking for a career? And so I'll kind of ask them, to walk me through, again, short-term and long-term, where they see themselves, what they're expecting, if they're willing to give a 1-year commitment. In some cases, I know my boss in the third interview at times has asked for a 2-year commitment. And we don't have anybody sign anything like that, but I'll tell you, that's probably a question. I know a lot of companies are starting to ask that, and that's probably a question that you want to be very prepared to answer one way or the other. And it can certainly be a make or break. And when you get people, yeah, absolutely, and then a couple of minutes later, you ask them if they have any questions, and they say, well, do we have to sign a contract about the, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you want to, as an interviewer, you want to ask more questions and dig a little bit deeper on that. And it's simply because of the amount of time investment on everybody's behalf invested into a new hire. So that's one thing. And then, another question, and it's something that as you were going through that, it just dawned on me, but I've been asked a few times, which I really respect. I will actually provide the information at the very end of the interview, because if I see this applicant moving forward, because I believe it's that valuable, but is retention. And, some people may feel like they're pressing too much in company business by asking this question, but I think that it's important for you, if this is a career field that you're really looking into, to ask, hey, tell me about your employee retention. Walk me through, where you guys are. Do you guys measure it? Some companies won't even measure it, and that would maybe be a little bit of a red flag for me if they're not concerned with how many people they're losing versus how many people they're keeping. And we're very detailed, specific on retention. We break it down from full-time to part-time, and we do it over 3 months, 6 months, a year. And I always address that, because with rapid growth and fast pace and promotion opportunities within our organization and other companies that are similar, comes the question, well, how can there always be opportunity? Right? At some point, you've got everybody, and they're all managers, and where do you go from there? And so you've got to be able to address the retention and changing fields and all of that. So
Perfect. Follow up. Make sure that you're writing a personal thank you to everybody that you talk to. I think that that's one of the nicest things that I get, and it just always the next day as a reminder, and I always acknowledge it, just because I'm like, okay, they actually cared, or they actually, didn't go necessarily on deaf ears. Keep a network of contacts for future reference. So just because you didn't necessarily get the job now, that doesn't mean that you'll never potentially get the job, or that doesn't necessarily mean that, hey, maybe this person knows somebody else. So just make sure that you guys are keeping all that contact information. If you go to career fairs, then hey, maybe, like I said, this isn't necessarily the company that you want to apply for. Just make sure that you're keeping all that contact information, and that just helps build your network. Keep contacts involved. Write them when if you learn something new or change directions. So again, if you maybe see something about a certain company that you know, maybe the representative, or maybe you see something that, hey, you had a change of heart, and maybe this is something that I'm interested in. Like I said, make sure that you guys are going back and writing to them.
I'm not too, no, I could care less about the card. I think it's a nice gesture, but I don't know.
An email, not a card.
Well, oh, okay, an email.
I guess because I'm nicer and people like me a little bit more. That's why I get
Very
all the
likely.
letters.
That's very
why I
likely.
get all the thank you letters.
But the network and contacts, I've had that happen numerous times, and that's something that is very real, specific to various industries. So we'll group us us in the automobile industry, and so you've got car sales, you've got, 75% of our business is via insurance companies, so all State Farm, all the big insurance companies. And so the automobile industry, if you will, bleeds over into so many different businesses, large and small. And so there's been times in which I get an email from a GM of a dealership saying, hey, I just interviewed this person for a sales position, and they said that they interviewed with Enterprise. What are your thoughts? What do you know? And whether I know them or not, or, so our industry is very large. It bleeds over into several others, and so I would certainly say that keeping them a part of your network, maybe reaching out, however often, if it is an industry that you're involved in, you certainly want to work for.
And I think that goes not just necessarily for people that are interviewing, I just think that goes for everybody. I know that we work based off of who we know, and you try to grow your business based off of those different relationships that you're carrying. Being a recruiter, you have to try to build different relationships with everybody. So whether it be Amy here at Lamar, making sure that you get to meet everybody within, the career services, just to make sure that, hey, if there's an event or something, that we can be present. So I think that that's with every industry that you get to know. And networking, the do's. Make sure that you're planning, that you learn from your experience. Hey, if you didn't necessarily get the position, learn why. What can you do better next time? You can always ask for feedback at the end of the interview. If they give you feedback, then awesome, you get to learn something from it. Make sure that you're smiling, make sure that you're keeping eye contact, a strong handshake like we were talking about. Use new words. I don't know what that means. If you don't know the meaning of the word, then don't use it. But yeah, listen actively, use humor appropriately, mind your manners and rules of etiquette, remember names, be honest if you've forgotten a name, and be creative with your name tag. And that's whenever you're actually, mingling and networking with other people. And make sure that you guys are thinking the host. I think for me, one of the biggest things is remembering names. A lot of the times, or like about 50% of the times, people call me Veronica or another person's name. So just make sure that that you remember who you're interviewing with. And a lot of the times, our regional vice president will say, hey, well, you had your second interview with, who was it they had it with? And if they can't remember Scott's name, then that means, hey, you weren't necessarily interested in the position to begin with. Or whenever
that
they come.
doesn't ever really happen. So
It happens.
no, but no doubt. In fact, I do that every single time, and as you're saying, it makes perfect sense. But I say, tell me about your first interview, and I know who they interviewed with, and I say, and who did you interview with? And then hopefully, if you're so memorable, they'll say Vanessa, and then I get them to kind of recap what they gathered information from the company from their interview. So.
And then that happens after the interview. A lot of the times I contact them, hey, how did your interview go? Well, good. Well, who did you meet with? With Scott and, what's the other guy's name? Well then, obviously, you were just interested in impressing Scott. You weren't necessarily interested in impressing who's potentially going to be your boss, the branch manager. So yeah, so make sure that you guys remember the names. The don'ts, don't drink too much, and that's at networking events. Make sure that you don't drink too much. Dress inappropriately, camp out at the food table. So make sure that you guys aren't necessarily standing by just around the food. Eat, drink, and talk in any combination. Talk loudly, smoke, go into great detail. Finish somebody's sentence. Search for powerful people by concentrating on job titles. A lot of the times with us, our management trainees are our future, recruiters, our future, branch managers. You never know who's going to get promoted to what area or what position they're going to be. Complain about anything, allow eyes to roam the room, correct others, humiliate others, sit with people you know, and argue. I think my biggest thing with this one is sit with people you know. Again, if you're trying to build that network around you, make sure that you're sitting next to somebody that you don't necessarily know. Make sure that you're trying to build different relationships, that you're not necessarily stuck within the same group. Do you have anything to say?
No, I love it. When we do any type of recognition events or anything like that, one of the things that we request all of our managers to do is get away from your own. If it's an area manager, get away from your own area employees. If it's a branch manager, get away from your branch employees. We want people to branch out and network. So.
And just make sure that you're following these key tips and open the door to a successful job search. Resources. So make your connections count. So is there any questions? Yes. Oh,
Definitely. Maybe in preparation about learning about the company you're trying to apply for, would you think it'd be a healthy idea to learn about the culture and what it's like to work there a little bit?
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think one of the tips for Southwest is, they look for like a healthy amount of a sense of humor.
Yeah, I would definitely learn a lot about the culture. Try to learn as much as you can. Make sure that you're doing your homework. You can research a lot of stuff online.
I mean, yeah, a lot of culture you don't really know until you're already
Right.
immersed in it, but
Right.
anything you can get before it can be useful.
Yes,
would you say?
definitely.
Talking to current employees, existing employees, I mean, there's nobody that's going to fault you for going to any business and saying, hey, you know what, I'm possibly going through the interview process, just, want to kind of observe or wanted to ask you a couple questions if you got a minute, what are your thoughts? And you're probably going to get some real and maybe some candid feedback from a current employee depending on their happiness, but that may be good or bad news for you. So
I remember we had an intern who, I guess we set up their interview and they went and they sat at one of the branches for about 45 minutes. Went and said hi to the branch manager and, said, hey, I have an interview and I just kind of wanted to see a little bit more about the operations. And I remember they sent us an email saying, hey, so-and-so was here, apparently they have an interview and they were sitting here asking questions about it. And they were super, super impressed. He's one of our.
How do you overcome the nervousness in the interview?
Well, I'm assuming that you're talking about it as the interviewee. So, I don't know. I think it's probably different for everybody, right? It's no different than anything you do. I mean, if you're in a speech class and they tell you to practice, you need to kind of know your outline. But at the same time, that's all going to go to the wind because you're not going to control the interview, right? There's specific questions that the interviewer is going to ask you. And, I think the biggest thing that you can do is be confident. Understand that if you go in there with the intent to tell me or anybody what they want to hear, people can see through it immediately. And you're not going to feel comfortable with your answers. Your delivery is probably not going to be genuine and sound very legit. So, I think as long as you're being honest, think about the answers. And one thing I'll always tell people, if I have an employee that's interviewing for a larger position, that uncomfortable silence, if somebody asks you a question in an interview, a lot of times we just instinctively think we have to have that answer. I have to, what is it? And you don't. You can take a minute and digest the question and, okay, and every second feels like a minute, I'm sure, but that uncomfortable silence is okay. And then, I would say it's your job to set the tone. And so if you want to convey that, hey, you've got great energy, you need to come in with the great energy. And you need to, smiling, I've been told smiling is a big helper. Possibly, if you're smiling and you're happy, they're going to be smiling, probably less concerned versus if somebody's kind of just staring at you as you're responding with a straight face.
I have something to add to that. For me, when I tell my friends and when I started off, what helped me a lot was when someone told me, remember, an interview goes both ways. You're not just getting interviewed, you're interviewing them. And it actually takes the edge off because you don't feel like that pressure's on you, you're actually putting the pressure on them.
Exactly.
Yes.
What's the right amount of time to follow up on an interview? For instance, I went to an interview, right, and I waited for a week to see if I would hear back from them. And I called them after a week and a half just to follow up to see where I stood. I wanted to know. And when I called back, they said, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to call you. We would like to have you, but I was wondering, what's the right amount of time to follow up on an interview if they have not contacted us first?
I think that you can set that or ask that question in the
At the
interview.
end of the interview,
Yeah.
it's okay to just ask, should I be expecting to hear back from you? Like, yes or no, in a week and a half or so?
Yeah, what can I expect as far as the time frame? When are you guys in the process of making the decision? When do you expect to have a response? And if they're not answering the question, don't be afraid to ask that. That's one of the things that it actually goes a long way with me if somebody is willing to. It's a sales position, so I want somebody that's got a little bit of sales in them, obviously, and don't be afraid to kind of pour that out and say, hey, do you have any concerns that would keep an applicant like myself from getting the position or keep you from offering the position, and put them on the spot.
Well, that also opens up the door for feedback. If there is any concerns, then, hey, these are my concerns. And then, like we said, learn from that and make sure that maybe in the next interview, we can I don't reply between 24 to 48 hours, then I'll be expecting somebody to email me and call me.
Because normally they would know if you're applying elsewhere, but also from our end, we would sue because they do know we're applying elsewhere. But then again, also, another question, if you don't mind me asking, would it be wrong to say if you were trying to interview for a different job elsewhere and you're trying to see who would hire you first?
Not at all. In fact, I think that's leverage on your side if you're a good applicant. I ask it in every interview, where else are you interviewing? And, and sometimes they'll be like, oh, kind of beat around the bush. And sometimes I may ask them specifically, they say sales, okay, like what types of positions? And, there's a couple of things I'm trying to derive from that. If I really like the applicant, I'm going to pick up the phone immediately after, get on the phone with Vanessa and say, hey, get this person in, let's let them know that we're, let's get them through the final stage of this deal, because I don't want to lose, potentially lose a good applicant. And I'll also do some selling probably in that interview. But the other thing is if I'm asking you where else you're interviewing and you tell me, let's just use Enterprise, and you tell me HEB and, wherever else, and it's 15 different industries of all different types of positions, sales, clerical, this, I really kind of question whether or not you're, you know what you want for yourself.
But if it's on the same field, the same line, then it would say you actually have pretty strong.
Yeah, you're marketable and you need to be confident in yourself, and absolutely. And basically, for lack of a better way of saying it, if you want me, you need to move quick. So, yeah, no doubt.
And I think it's exactly how he says it. A lot of the times if I take a candidate, I'm like, okay, we need to set them up as fast as you can because they're applying out somewhere else. Or he'll call me vice versa, hey, he says like I was looking at you, so I need you to go ahead and hurry up with this. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I think y'all may have just touched on my question a little bit, but usually the interview process, I know you said it's like usually 2 to 3 interviews.
Mm-hmm.
What's the time span of those lumps of interviews? Is
For
it like
our-
within a week or?
For our industry, or what we do, it depends, to be honest with you, because with us, my interview might be on a Tuesday, but he might not be available maybe until Thursday, Friday,
We try to get them, these two, we try to get,
within the same week.
yeah, no doubt, very close together. Where the variable comes in is the third is with our regional vice president, and so it's not, you can't just go and find 5 hours if you had 5 applicants on his schedule in 1 day or 2 days. So,
But I would say on average, like 2 weeks, a week and a half.
well, I'll give you an example. So last week we went through all 3 steps in 1 week, and the applicants started today, as a matter of fact. So it varies, but yeah, I think you could expect. And some of the not knowing kind of tying into your question of, hey, what's to be expected and what's next? If there is a next interview, I would ask as many questions as possible. And earlier she was talking about maybe even going as far as asking about the person you're interviewing with. But I would be, okay, is this interview any different than this one? Is it more specific to the industry? Just so you can prepare better, and then ask, time frame as far as when do you think something like that would be set up? Because if they say, hey, it's 2 weeks, then it's 2 weeks, and you can deal with it accordingly. So.
As you said, 85% of the key is networking, and you mainly talked about physical networking or building physical relationship in job fairs or interviews. Nowadays, it's more online based. Do you believe that does it work or not?
Absolutely.
As a recruiter, if someone sends you a message in LinkedIn, do you care about that? Do you really consider that message that someone is interested in your company or?
If somebody is one of my contacts, no doubt, absolutely. But if it's my first contact may not be necessarily the somebody that I speak to often, but I found them via Vanessa or via somebody else that I can trust and talk to and pick up the phone call. There's no doubt in my mind. And the companies go a long way. So if you're supported or somebody finds you by way of this company, which is a large company, and okay, just human nature is we assume that they're affiliated with a successful large company or something. So yeah, it does go a long way. And the networking, and again, it's all industry specific. And sometimes it'll have no play in your entire interview process whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I think what we see now from social media and all that, I think you fast forward 10 years, I don't even know that we can really even guess what to expect. I mean, heck, you may be gone. The interviews may be online for the first interviews. I don't know. But
In that case, you'll be gone. You'll be sending it.
I'm the middle guy.
Yes. Any other questions?
Okay, I wanted to ask you, what is it that you went to University of Houston for, and how did you know you would end up staying with Enterprise?
How did I know that I was gonna? Because I did the sales program, and that's actually how I met them.
Oh,
So that's why I went out to do an outside sales job, but I always kept in touch with the recruiter. And it wasn't just an enterprise recruiter that I kept up with. I had other companies. Like I remember when I was interviewing for Enterprise, I was also interviewing for Edward Jones. So I had other different recruiters that I was keeping up with. Yeah, but I saw the potential in Enterprise, and Scott sold it to me, and yeah. So.
She was one of the ones that I actually had to pick up the phone and say, hey, we need to move quick. she's in the process of interviewing, but I think that I can't even remember what your outside sales job was prior to, but there's nobody that comes into this again with identified,
Right.
hey, you may know the industry or you may just know sales, right? Sales is everything, and you look at us, nobody's come into this and said, hey, this is what I wanted to do, I never, and people get angry, my boss gets angry when I say this, but I never thought that I would be with Enterprise still today, because when I took on the job, it was one of those deals, I needed a job. I wasn't looking for a career, I wasn't looking for, upward mobility, I had probably had all the wrong concerns and focuses, but I needed a job. And then once I got the job, I was like, wow, okay, I'm doing good at it. I was getting recognition, winning awards, and those are all things I love. And so, and then it was super competitive, and I loved everything about it. And so, you fast forward, and now we're 12 years into it. So.
And I think for me, it was one of those things that I saw the potential and the big picture for it. And I remember whenever I first came in, I was like, hey, I need to be an assistant manager between a year. I was like, if not, and you can ask him, I had to be at a certain position in a year. And I was like, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to work as hard as I can, but I need to be in a certain position. But I was able to see the big picture compared to everybody else. So, and that's what I liked about Enterprise. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
What advice could you give us to take away from this? That could help us as far as, from your personal experience.
Wow, that's a broad topic. I could probably find myself drifting in a lot of different topics. I would say, if I was to narrow it down, kind of all the things that we just went through, interview. I think the interview process, well, let's face it, it's everything, right? It's whether or not you get the job, your level of engagement, preparation are key. And then furthermore, I think, again, you've got to be presenting the best of you. And if the best of you is to, not have any questions and all that, then, you probably shouldn't set your sights too high. You've got to go in there prepared with questions. You've got to go in there excited about it. And I love it when people actually ask for the job. And it seems really cheesy. They're interviewing, of course they want the job, right? Well, no, I want somebody that's aggressive, somebody that wants the job and wants me to know they want the job. And so, whether or not that would tie, that's more sales-based, whether that would tie to whatever industry that you're looking for, I'm not sure, but I can tell you that from an interview perspective, and she does probably 10 times, 50 times more than I do of interviews, for me, it's to make or break. This is my first impression of this person, and I always say to myself, this is the best that they have. And does that exceed my expectations, or does it not? And does it fit within what Enterprise is looking for? And I tell people, very similar to what you said, hey, listen, what we're doing is we're deciding if you're a good applicant for us. But equally as important, when I talk about the retention and why people have left, I say, you've got to make sure that we're a good company for you. And so by that, I give them the top 3 reasons that we've, lost people, and for the most part, or actually I give them really the top 2, because it's important. You want to know why people would start here and then leave. Or at least you should want to know. So.
And just to piggyback on that, just remember, those 30 minutes, those 45 minutes, that's all we get to see. So you have to be able to bring in your personality, make sure that you're able to smile. A lot of the times, people are like, oh, I have a great personality, but they haven't smiled throughout the entire interview. That's kind of what he's saying. That's as best as it's going to get. So just make sure that whatever you're portraying is what you actually are and what the person that you really are. We don't get to see you, in front of customers. We don't get to see you, interacting with different employees. So you just have to be able to portray that in your interview and make sure that you're able to convey that and that, whoever's interviewing you gets that from you.
And one other thing that with the whole social media piece, I'll add in, I'm not by any stretch involved, I don't get involved in it, but I will say that earlier on, whether it's from a recruiting standpoint or even the branch managers, if they know that they're interviewing somebody locally, they will absolutely look Facebook and look them up. And so it's certainly worthy of addressing that, hey, you want to be cognizant of that. If you're interviewing for a position and you've got a picture on your Facebook or your whatever the other ones are, drinking beer at some bar and partying, that's great, but you have to understand that's also going to be the perception you're giving to the people that you're applying for. So just something worthy of keeping in mind.
The same thing with the email address. Make sure that it's something that's appropriate, that it's
Oh gosh, yeah.
that it's not like
That's great.
something.
It's unbelievable what people will actually put on a resume. And it seems silly to use that as something to judge, but it's tough. It's tough to overcome.
No, like we would see it like at least say maybe once a week, something like that. Something to where it's not necessarily like an appropriate email address. Just make sure that you fix that. Anything else?
You said we should ask questions and stuff, but what are some of the questions you would not want someone to ask?
That's a good question. I don't know that there's really anything. I mean, I've probably been asked just about everything from how much do I personally make and, things that I would say they're not appropriate, but probably a little more intimate than what I would want to discuss with somebody I'm interviewing. But I would, I don't know that there's really anything that I can think of that would be taboo, if you would. I mean, you obviously want to avoid the obvious, the race, religion, sexual orientation, all the HR quota topics. But, oftentimes people look around in my office, they may see a trophy or this golf picture or ask me, and they try to tie that in. And I love it if somebody's trying to, in that quick second get to know me or whatever and ask questions about that. But yeah, I really, as long as it's appropriate and it's business related, I don't think there's anything, back to the point of the benefits and pay and all that, those are appropriate questions. And let me just reemphasize that. Those certainly are acceptable. However, it shouldn't be your first question once you're kind of into your interview process. And B, if you have the opportunity to do it earlier on, do some research by talking to an employee or in the first interview, or by doing any of your research on the company. I think you need to. And then any questions that you have, because I know she goes over. She's got to check. I know what she goes over, and so if they ask me that, it's kind of a twofold, okay, well, wow, it's kind of odd that you're asking that as your first question. The second thing is, I know that you've already been given the information. So if you have questions about it, call her up. In this case, Vanessa, or reach back out to the person that you got the information from and ask those questions. The next stage, usually any second or third interview, is this is all about you and is this a good applicant for the for the company.
And I think for me, anything that's not necessarily related to work, because he gets a lot of the stuff that's already filtered.
Yeah.
He gets like the people that I like already. On a first interview, just like he says, anything that's related to the job, anything that's related, obviously me and the job, but anything else wouldn't necessarily be, Okay. Yes.
What is the best answer to when you ask about their strengths and weaknesses?
I don't know.
The weakness. You want to be like pinpointed out or just kind of?
Well, I mean, obviously that's one of those ones that's tailored to everybody, and I think that, so if I were to answer that right now for somebody, it would be somewhere along the lines of being able to prioritize my goals or my tasks that I've got assigned. Every day I'm going to go home and look, I want to be the greatest employee in the world, but I'm going to be able to finish everything. And so then the tasks that I don't finish throughout the day, making sure that some of them, these aren't deal buster type tasks, things that need to get done. And so for me, it would be sense of urgency, and because in my role there are a million fires that come up every single day. And, you know, an employee over here got into a car accident, this employee wants to quit, or they got into a fight with somebody, or this customer did the, you know, and so there's so many little things that I'm kind of pulled off, and then I lose track of where I go. That would be, you know, I wouldn't give that entire spiel, but it would be something along like that. The ones that are just, I mean, I probably have one, I know this goes for you, but I probably get one out of at least 50 interviews that gives a very genuine response to that. And everybody else I could probably group into 4 or 5 different answers, which is they work too hard, they, you know, stay
Take
too
on
late.
so much.
Yeah, take way too much on, and that, you know, they can't tell people no, and they provide too good a customer service. People walk all over them. It's like, okay, that's your weakness. You're great because we need great people in customer service, but is it really a weakness? And I'll tell them, and I will not move off this question. And I've had people sit there for a long time. I'll tell them, well, yeah, but let's be honest, that's not a weakness. And, you know, I love the fact that you're passionate about customer service. So what, and then I'll rephrase it. What's something that if you were to get hired on, that we could help you out with, and something that we could help to develop within you that you'd like to see? And then if they come back with, well, you know, I work, you know, long nights because I want to make sure I get everything done. Again, I'll say, well, okay, not necessarily a weakness. I'm thinking more, you know, your business attributes, you know, yourself, the way you carry yourself day to day, way you interact with people, you know, anything that we can help coach you. So I won't move off the question if they can't give you a legit.
And I think about this something like that. If it's the weakness, make sure that everything that you're saying is related to the job, because I've had people that are like, okay, so what's your weakness? And they say something like shopping. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I drink too
Yeah.
much or something.
Yeah, so you're like, oh, okay, well, we have something in common, but, you know, that's not the answer that I'm necessarily looking for. Or something that, what's your strength? And they'll say something that has nothing to do with what you're interviewing with or you professionally. So yeah, so just make sure. And also bringing up personal stuff during the interviews. Just make sure that you kind of keep that at home and saying something about, oh, like, I'm looking, like, what motivates you? And they'll say something totally non-related to work.
My top 3 answers to that question is I'm not a morning person. I don't like bad attitudes. I don't do well with those. And when I get mad, I tend to close myself off. Those are my top 3 answers to that question.
Those are very honest. I mean, I guess it would be, you know, and so if I'm being very honest with you, I would say in our line of work, from a customer service perspective, you wouldn't get sent on, just based off of one of those questions. And the reason would be is simply, we have plenty of people that come in and yell at us every single day. And so that's a prime example of what we were just talking about. You've got to make sure you're a good fit. We've got to make sure you're a good fit. And that's a case in which I would just tell you flat out, hey, you know, so here's why I don't think you would be a good fit, and why we would be a good fit for you. And it's because we deal with 75% insurance-related accidents. People are in accidents. They come into our office. Guess what? They're not happy. They're upset. Now, it's not with us, but they tend to take it out, or they may be frustrated. We never know what this customer's going through. Sometimes they may have lost a loved one in, you know, an accident that just happened. And so often they will throw a lot of that our way. Right?
And that's why I said top 3, depends on the job.
Sure. I mean, you can bounce between however. And I'm just, you know, that would be kind of my response to that. And but yeah, they're honest and genuine, and I don't think anybody would question anything behind it.
I use the one about the people who's like a janitor job. I applied for that one. They actually paid really good. I was surprised. So when I found out how much they pay, I went and applied for a phone janitor job.
Yeah, in the morning. So as long as you're interviewing for a job that, you know, starts later morning or afternoon, then, you know, the morning one would be an ideal response.